Okay, it's Philip Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. And today is December 19th, Saturday, December 19th, 2020. And what I want to talk about today is how you can make brief presentations to like a city council or a county council for saving Confederate monuments. Most of them, many of them will limit you to 3 minutes of comment. So I want to talk about how to do that. But first, click on the notification bell in the upper right, and you'll be notified of any future Civil War Chat episode. So let's get started. I've got two recommendations for you. Number one is focus on a single topic. One single topic. Don't try and include too much. One topic. Two, once you've chosen that topic, write down your remarks. Write them down. Read them to yourself a half a dozen times. Be sure you fit in the 3-minute limit. Now, what you can do is you can go with other people and, divide up your topics. And that way you'll have a whole case made, but focus on one topic only. So here, I'll give you some examples of topics. Number one, the statues were not racist. Number two, disparaging future former Confederate soldier is an insult to the later American soldiers who were inspired by them. Number three, the war was as much about quarantining blacks in the South as it was about slavery. And we'll get to that. Number four, I want to talk a little bit about Lee. You can email me, Phil_Lee, L-E-I-G-H, @me.com if you're looking for other items, other single topics. But let's move ahead. Let's talk about the monuments were not racist. Okay. The bulk of the monuments went up between 1898 and 1918. And the reason for that is that there were two of them. One is the most obvious, the survivors of the war, the surviving soldiers were dying off. It's that simple. And anyone that wanted to honor them had to get around and get it done. And the second one is compelling, but often ignored by academic historians. And that is that Southerners didn't have any money. As late as 1900, the per capita income in the South was 51% of the national average, which means that if you look at the outside the South, the average per capita income was more than twice what it was in the South. Now, the surge that came after 1898 was partly also influenced by the fact that Union veterans saw that the sons of Confederate veterans volunteered eagerly to help win the war, the Spanish-American War. So then they said, okay, our former rivals in the Southern armies, they deserve monuments of their own. If you look at the 1911 to 1915 period, that was the semi-centennial of the Civil War. So it was also natural that the children of veterans from both sides would want to put up statues at that. I mean, that's in fact what happened. There was a surge of Confederate monuments during that period, 1911 to 1915, the semi-centennial of the war. There was also a surge of Union veterans statues. This wasn't for racism. And now here's a point to include in this argument. 5% of the white population of the South as soldiers died in that war. If we were to enter a war today and lose 5% of our population, it would be 17 million. 17 million. The number of American soldiers killed in World War II was only 405,000. And compare that to 17 million. The scale of the casualties and the deaths caused by that war are unprecedented. And anyone who thinks that the children of the survivors and the grandchildren of the survivors wanted to honor those survivors for any racist reason could only be a cynic or a liar. Well, in truth, they could be lying, like the Southern Poverty Law Center could be lying simply because they make money by doing it. They get donations by doing it. When you consider the losses, it would be it would just be incredible to think that anyone would would be so cynical as to believe that that was done out of racism. And the inscriptions themselves on the statues also make that case. But let's move on. Another argument you can make, another single point, is that future soldiers in the United States Army, many of them, were inspired by the Confederate soldier. In World War II, for example, the first American flag on the Japanese fortress at Okinawa, the Surrey Castle, the first American flag to fly over that captured castle, was a Confederate battle flag. And it was put there by a company of Marines who wanted to honor their captain, their commanding captain, who was cut down by a paralyzing wound on the final assault. He happened to be from South Carolina. He kept that Confederate battle flag in his helmet, and he wasn't ostentatious about it. They took it out of his helmet and they put it on over the Surrey Castle. And these were soldiers from, typical companies, 100 men, so probably from all over the country. They certainly just weren't Southerners. Also within this context, you can mention that presently in the volunteer army, 44% of them come from the South, although the South accounts for only 36% of the population. And I don't have the figures on the top of my head right now, or tip of my lip right now, or tip of my tongue right now, but New England was far behind that. The South is contributing more soldiers to the volunteer army per capita, whereas New England is below average per capita, significantly below average. There are no safe spaces, I guess, in the volunteer army. There are safe spaces, as we know, in academia. A third point that I don't know if this will work for you, but you could try it. The war was not about slavery. Secession need not have led to war. Secession could have been accomplished peacefully. Norway, for example, seceded from Sweden. There was no war. Why, when just 7 southern states want to leave the Union, should there be a war to keep them in? The 4 upper South states had already warned the Washington government, meaning Lincoln, that if they were to coerce the 7 cotton states back into the Union, they would force the 4 states of the upper South to secede, which is what happened. Those 4 states had half of the white population of the 11-state Confederacy. There's the logic that secession necessarily had to lead to war is simply wrong. What Lincoln really wanted to accomplish, or certainly the Republican Party really wanted to accomplish, and you can find their own words about this, with the 1860 Republican Party platform, which was no slaves could be taken into any of the federal territories. That was the official wording. But if you look at their speeches beforehand, what you'll find is they wanted to keep blacks out of the federal territories. They wanted to keep blacks out, whether they were slave or not. Illinois, which was Lincoln's home state, for example, would permit blacks into the state, but they had to be financially prosperous, and their political rights were severely limited. And as far as there doesn't seem to be any record of Lincoln speaking out against those political limitations. But here are the facts. Up to the start of the Civil War in 1861, there were 33 states. 15 of them permitted slavery, 18 did not. After the start of the Civil War, every state up to and including Alaska and Hawaii that came into the Union, except for possibly West Virginia, came into the Union with tiny black populations. Places like Wyoming, Montana, tiny black populations, less than 1%. The Republican Party got what it wanted through that war. It kept blacks quarantined in the South. As late as 1900, Only 8% of the black population was outside the South. When they did go north, there were riots. The real purpose was to keep blacks out of the Western territories. Lincoln said that in his Peoria speech in 1854. We want the federal territories to be put to the best use, and the best use is for whites. So that's an angle you're going to be worried. Stick to that topic. Why did secession need to lead to war? It didn't. It's a presumption that's made by academics for the purpose of demonizing the South. That's their whole objective. It's not truth. They don't want truth. Okay, lastly, what about Lee? There's a couple things I'd say about Lee. Number one, he took responsibility for his failures. At the Battle of Gettysburg, when Pickett's charge, the survivors of Pickett's charge, there were 15,000 of them that went out. I don't know, maybe half of them came back. When those survivors came back, Lee rode out on his horse Traveler to meet them. And when he met them, he said, all of this is my fault. No one is to blame but me. But all good men must rally now. He was concerned that the Federals would counterattack if they had any sense. All of this is my fault. No one is to blame but me. Now compare that to our Secretary of State, who was called before congressional hearings to defend her non-action in the Benghazi affair. And she goes, "What difference does it make at this point? What happened? Or what difference does it make what we did or didn't do? It's different. It's a different time now. Move on. There's nothing to see here. That's in the past." Now, we can have a country that has leaders that will act like Hillary did, or we can have leaders like Lee, who take the responsibility upon their own shoulders. Our country would be better off with those by Lee. I don't think, it's obvious. I don't even need to say that. You just say, here's what Lee did. He took responsibility for his failures. You don't even need to throw in the Hillary stuff. There's probably some Democrats on the commission. Democrat women too. So, but the point is that we've got politicians all over the place that will think of any kind of reason to avoid responsibility for their own failures. And that's not what Lee did. And the second point is that a second point you can make about Lee, if you want to, is you can focus on the fact that when people met him, they felt they were in the presence of a superior person. Let me just read you, for example, the remarks by Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Fremantle of Her Majesty's Coldstream Guards. He was over in the Confederate States for 3 months. He entered at Brownsville, Texas, went through 9 of the Confederate States. The only 2 he missed were Arkansas and Florida. He saw the South during 1863, in the midpoint of the war. He ended up at Gettysburg, and he's in the movie Gettysburg he's the fellow with the flamboyant mustache and the red uniform. So he was there, and he wrote a book called 3 Months in the Southern States, which was about his journey through the Southern States. And here's what he said upon meeting Lee at Gettysburg. "General Lee is, almost without exception, the handsomest man of his age I ever saw. He's 56 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, very well made, well set up, a thorough soldier in appearance." Sometimes appearances are exactly what a person that sometimes is exactly what they appear. "And his manners are most courteous and full of dignity. I imagine no man has so few enemies or is so universally esteemed. He has none of the small vices, such as smoking, drinking, chewing, or even swearing, and his bitterest enemy has never accused him of any of the greater ones. Think about this particularly. He is near, well, let's see, what? He is a perfect gentleman in every respect. Sorry it took me so long to find it. He is a perfect gentleman in every respect. That is Fremantle describing Lee. Now, leap forward 5 years. Lee is president of Washington College in Lexington, Virginia. Students are beginning to flock to the college because of his presence, because of his leadership. And they're coming from all over the South, and increasingly they'll come from all over the country. One of the freshmen who evidently wanted to do well asked General Lee, General Lee, may I have a list of the rules here at Washington College? And Lee turned to him and said, we have but one rule at Washington College, and that is that every student must be a gentleman. From that single statement comes the Washington and Lee Honor Code. Oh, I know. You'll find people say, oh, well, there was an honor code at Washington College before Lee ever got there. Yeah, but it was inoperative. It wasn't what it is now. What it is now, according to Roger Mudd, who was a former CBS News anchor and a graduate of WNL, it meant that teachers could pass out their final exams and then leave the classroom, knowing that the students would not cheat. So that one answer, a legacy of that one answer, is the honor code. If they drop the Lee name, in my opinion, the honor code goes down like the Titanic. Because any student with a room temperature IQ would know that the school is telling them a lie. They're telling them a lie that Lee does not merit the respect that he truly does. And if the school will tell them a lie, then why pay any attention to the honor code? And our whole nation will suffer for it. So that's what I have to say. So let me repeat 2 things. If you're going to make a presentation to a county commission, city commission, keep your talk to under 3 minutes and focus on a single topic, one single topic. And 2, write down your remarks. If you got a computer, use Microsoft Word, whatever you got, and print it out, read it to yourself out loud at least a half a dozen times until you know you're going to take less than 3 minutes. If you can, get other people to join you. Divide up the topics. Okay, that's it for today. And I want to thank you for watching. And I appreciate your attendance. I appreciate your support. Appreciate you watching. And I look forward to seeing you again. So for December 19th, this is Phil Lee. And thanks again for watching.